Bob's in London. Bob, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I'm a bit nervous.
Are you?
So I'm just going to kind of tell you...
Yeah, take your time.
I'll tell you my story.
Please.
It's more my mum's story than mine. Okay. She's one of many women that were spied on by the Met Police. They were deceived by undercover coppers in Special Branch across a couple of units that we know of, the SDS and the MPIU.
Yes, this, for people who don't know, undercover police officers would a completely fake identity that they were falling in love with.
Exactly, James. And then they'd essentially abandon them. And it's always kind of been portrayed in the media as historic abuse, which it has been, but it's also happening right up until now. So there are women finding out today at the moment.
Right.
There's a public inquiry. And the Met are still being essentially obtuse and trying to hide the cover names. So as more kind of people investigate and look for who might have been an undercover police officer, women are getting phone calls all around now saying this guy from your past was actually spying on you.
Good God.
And the relationship wasn't real.
How did your mum find out?
I can't go into detail.
Fine,
because she's anonymous.
Okay,
Sorry.
no, let's not go no further.
I can give you a few examples.
Of course.
So it's all in the public domain, but under cover names, so I can't talk about my mum specifically.
Okay.
They essentially, the way it started was a group of women uncovered it over a number of years. There's a book out called Deep Deception that they've written, 5 of the original women about their story. And essentially, if they hadn't have done that, we wouldn't know about it today. It's still happening. The police are still doing it. At least there's a public inquiry that's been dragged out by the Met that's starting to investigate the scale of the abuse. It's a really shocking story.
And this speaks to the word institutionalised, doesn't it, really?
Yeah,
because they go back to the office or whatever you call it, or they go back to normal duty years later, and God only knows what sort of stories they tell or what sort of reception they receive for what is, in a sense, state-sanctioned rape, not to put too fine a point on it.
And if you're looking for a link back to the report that's come out today, there's I think it's Section 6. There's 2 units that are named. It's MO19 and the Parliamentary Command.
Yes.
They're both seen as elite units within the police. Normal police officers go there. It's not like they come in from MI or anywhere like that.
Sure.
But they're still seen as elite and a cut above. And these units that spied on women and had encouraged intimate relationships, the SDS and the, I think, MPOIU, they were also seen as elite. They harboured that culture of misogyny, sexism, and it's not talked about because the women, they weren't killed, they weren't raped and murdered. Well, they might have been raped, but they weren't murdered. It was a different type of abuse, equally bad but different.
How do you feel on a day like today? I mean, because is there a sense for you and your mum of being extraordinary victims, of being somehow freakish, for want of a better word? You know what I mean? So completely at odds with the status quo. To find out that actually you're a big, but another part of an institutionalised problem. You're not outliers. You're not exceptions. You're part. That's again what institutionalised means, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. It's because it's a different type of abuse, as I said. It's still misogyny. It's still the institutionalised sexism.
Well, it's bigger than that. It wouldn't happen as a tactic unless there was institutionalised misogyny in the police service. Nobody would say, why don't you go and try and have sex with that woman so we can find out what plans you've got at Greenham Common or what plans you've got about that environmental. No one would think of that unless women were perceived in the way that Michelle in Ealing told us earlier. Women are always perceived by the kind of police officers we're talking about. It just wouldn't come up as an idea.
That's why they pull in. That's why it's normal coppers.
Yeah.
Coppers that work in your local force will be pulled into this command, and then they'll be doing that work that you think is that doesn't happen in this country, that you think doesn't happen anymore, but still does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not. But still, the issue is the police are still being obtuse. So there's a public inquiry. They're frustrating it. It was meant to report years ago. and there's just been delay after delay because they're sending in the lawyers to try and hide.
Well, it's reputation protection, which is another facet of the institutionalisation, is it doesn't occur to top brass in the Met that protecting ourselves shouldn't be the priority. And you know, this happens everywhere. This happens in schools, this happens in councils, this happens in probably radio stations. That obviously the priorities of the top brass is almost always to protect the reputation of the institution. But it shouldn't be, because protecting the reputation of the institution involves an abnegation of obvious duty to victims of crime in the most extreme cases, and of racism, misogyny and sexism, homophobia in all the other cases. Thank you. I'm very late for the break. I hope you feel you had enough time to talk, and I'm so sorry for what your mum continues to go through.
This is LBC.